Hi, welcome back. Tim B. Cumming. The first of the two novels, Exit. And for those who live in Stratford or have been to Stratford, you may see lots of Stratford, Ontario references. And since I grew up there, there's a little bit of fiction, a little bit of fact, all mixed up into a stew. And so I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and this is the first chapter of Exit, and it's called The Wrong Side of the Tracks. Daniel Wentworth wore monogrammed silk ties and silk underwear. I do not know if his briefs had monograms or not. The lobbyist loved the feel of silk and the smell of money. When Daniel was a child, little Danny boy despised his middle-class parents. The boy dressed in house-brand jeans with elastic bands in the back, resented his father's unkempt hair and mildewed books. His mother's retro folk music was a joke. The boy's parents could not or would not buy him the sneakers he coveted, the ones with all the appropriate whooshes or stripes or letters. The lad believed their denial of his fiscal rights was clear evidence his parents did not love their offspring enough. Danny was embarrassed by his family's orange-colored Vegas station wagon. He hated his complacent neighbors who rotted away in their cookie-cutter houses, gorging themselves on cheeseburgers and domestic beer. He despised those suburbanites who settled for a dead-end middle-class existence, those small-town people with small minds dressed in stained sweatpants and who wore pajamas during the daytime. The bourgeoisie ate TV dinners at home. When they did leave their prefab houses, they waddled through the doors of franchise restaurants, masquerading with the names of big cities these working poor would never visit. The Wentworths lived on the wrong side of the railway tracks. Their uneven home was doors away from a bar that played both kinds of music, country and western. The hotel eventually became a strip club, the locals derisively nicknamed the Zoo. Train cars serenaded Danny's nights with clink, clunk, screech, clang lullabies as the family tried to fall asleep in their little red house that smelled like mold and every year sank further into the ground. The Wentworth family was not poor. Poor people did not own cottages, but young Danny knew they were not rich. The Wentworths owned a Muskoka getaway with no indoor toilet. The cottage outhouse had a seat that pinched one's buttocks. Family members who didn't want to use the outhouse in the middle of the night used chamber pots. Wafting smells of urine and feces combined in an unholy marriage of stink. Daniel Wentworth didn't just take offense to the family car, he also resented his father's hit-and-miss outboard motor and sardine can of an aluminum boat. Neighbors from the cottage next door passed by them in wood-paneled speedboats. They waved their carefree, confident arms like only people with money can. Water skied, a skill they'd acquired in Mexican resorts, and splashed their poor cousins as they rocketed past. They might as well turn our boat upside down and laugh at us as we bob in the water like rats from the Titanic, young Danny thought. They do not mean to splash us, the boy knew. They're not trying to rub it in that they're rich and I'm not. Nonetheless, Danny wanted to drift to the bed of the lake when the jet-setting neighbors surged past them and almost sank the bookworm family with waves punching the side of the tin can boat. Our rich neighbors may not be laughing at us, but the waves seem to be, Danny thought. Young Mr. Wentworth wore mall-bought jeans with fake brand names, while his preppy cottage neighbors beamed broad, cloud-white smiles, dressed in clothes straight from New York boutiques with French names. Danny was born fighting for material success. When the lad was 8, he would walk down his family's street with an empty suitcase. The precocious lad walked down one side of the street and asked people if they had old books they did not want. When he had his suitcase full to overflowing, he would cross the street and knock on the doors of the houses on the other side of the street. He then asked the people inside if they wanted to buy the books their across the street neighbors had owned only moments before. Danny turned the junk from one side of the street into cash on the other side. Just as his parents were flaky, Daniel was as solid as a cement foundation. When he reached his teens, the boy couldn't wait to leave his embarrassment of a home. The teenager worked relentlessly. He pumped gas at a service station and completed his homework during breaks. He also did deliveries for an amateur Bible scholar who ran a local printing shop. His boss spent so much time asking customers provocative scriptural questions, it was a wonder that anything got printed at all. When that shift was done, Danny would change into a bow tie and run to the church, a posh local restaurant, where he would charm the old society ladies in their money and pearls. The hard worker denied himself extravagances and saved his wages and tips, as he swore to himself he would one day attend business school on the other side of the border. Danny wore that he would wear a pinstriped shirt, and his pinstriped shirt would brush against all the other pinstriped shirts worn by the future Forbes listers who would amble with that arrogant, carefree walk of the rich. Together, he and the striped shirts would walk that entitled walk down the academic hallways that led to the corridors of power. Daniel detested the land which nurtured him. He despised his home, his perceived poverty, and his department store clothes. The lad even despised his own country, which did not appear to be as successful, as prosperous, as confident as the big, brash, bold state a few hours to the south. Canadians tend to feel inferior to their American cousins, but Daniel's inferiority complex amounted to self-hatred. Danny could not bear to watch Canadian football. He had a visceral reaction every time someone scored a rouge. He took offense that a kicker could get a point for missing a field goal. That's what's wrong with this country, he seethed. Wentworth's venom for his second-best country and his second-best clothes and his second-best parents was a form of self-loathing. But Danny's self-hatred should not be confused with self-defeatism. Daniel used his antipathy towards his station, his nation, and his relations, and used it as a fuel for his own success. He used that anger as a fuel to fire his resolve. He would be better than his parents, better than his country, better than his peers. Being better also meant being richer, of course. Working at the church, Danny met lots of Americans. They were loud and proud and larger than life. They wore white pants. They drove big cars that drank gasoline like drunks devour a bottle of Night Train Express. The smiling Yankees with deep pockets were everything his parents were not. Brash, rich, ambitious, unapologetic. Danny wanted a piece of it all. The teenager paid close attention to the people who came into the church. He made a mental note if they put their fork in their left hand or the right, and if they faced the fork up or down. He memorized their names, their likes, their dislikes. He noticed the scents of the women at the table. The boy noted whether they smelled like money or they smelled like death, or both. He remembered the color and fabric of shirts worn by the men, whether they wore cufflinks or suspenders, and how they folded their pocket square. Daniel even asked the men which stocks were worth purchasing. Wentworth began buying stocks, not to earn money at first, but to learn about commerce. While the spawn of the upper class wasted their time and birthrights stuffing money up their noses, or drinking themselves stupid on the fairway, Daniel was soberly schooling himself wherever he went. And that is The Wrong Side of the Tracks, the first chapter of the book Exit, which, together with Climate, put those together and you get one book called Planet. Clear as mud. Thanks for listening.